What happens when Hollywood's most respected actress comes face to face with a host who thinks he can humiliate anyone for a few cheap laughs? Tonight, we're diving deep into one of the most shocking moments in late-night television history. You're about to witness how Jimmy Kimmel's arrogance and complete lack of respect pushed Meryl Streep to her absolute breaking point. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments. What you think about hosts who cross the line with their guests? Studio lights were blazing hot that Tuesday evening as Meryl Streep settled into the guest chair across from Jimmy Kimmel. She had been promoting her latest film, a deeply personal project about family relationships and forgiveness that had taken her 3 years to bring to the screen. The audience was electric with anticipation, packed with fans who had waited hours just to see the legendary actress in person. Jimmy leaned back in his chair with that trademark smirk that his regular viewers knew all too well. He had spent the entire afternoon in his dressing room, not preparing thoughtful questions about Meryl's craft or her latest work, but instead plotting what he considered comedy gold. His writers had handed him a folder full of what they called roast material, designed to get laughs at the expense of his guest, rather than actually showcase her talents or promote her film. As the cameras rolled and the show went live, Jimmy's opening seemed normal enough. He welcomed Meryl with the standard pleasantries, commenting on how beautiful she looked and thanking her for coming on the show. But anyone who knew Jimmy's interview style could sense something brewing beneath the surface. His eyes had that mischievous glint that usually meant trouble for whoever was sitting across from him. Meryl, ever the professional, smiled graciously and began talking about her new film with genuine passion. She spoke about the emotional challenges of playing a mother dealing with loss, how she had drawn from her own experiences as a parent, and the incredible collaboration she had enjoyed with the director and her fellow cast members. Her words were thoughtful and sincere, exactly what you would expect from someone who had dedicated her entire life to the art of storytelling. But Jimmy seemed completely uninterested in anything she was saying. Instead of following up on her thoughtful responses or asking deeper questions about her process, he kept glancing at his note cards with an expression that made it clear he was just waiting for his moment to pounce. The audience began to notice the disconnect too, sensing that something was off about the dynamic between host and guest. When Meryl finished describing a particularly moving scene from her film, Jimmy nodded dismissively and immediately shifted gears. His tone changed completely as he leaned forward with that predatory smile that regular viewers of late night television have unfortunately become accustomed to seeing. "You know, Meryl," Jimmy began, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me for years. You've won all these awards. You've been called the greatest actress of your generation. But honestly, I've always wondered if you're just really good at crying on command. I mean, is that really acting, or is it just, turning on the waterworks whenever the script calls for it?" The question hit the studio like a physical blow. The audience fell completely silent, unsure whether this was some kind of joke they weren't getting, or if their beloved host had actually just insulted one of the most respected performers in the history of cinema. Meryl's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but those who knew her work could see the flash of hurt and disbelief that crossed her face before she composed herself. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that question?" Meryl asked, her voice steady, but with an edge that suggested she couldn't quite believe what she had just heard. Jimmy, apparently oblivious to the fact that he had just crossed a major line, doubled down with even more enthusiasm. "Come on, don't be so sensitive. I'm just saying that crying isn't really that hard, right? I mean, my writers cry all the time when I reject their material. Are you telling me that what you do is somehow more impressive than that?" The camera caught everything, the way Meryl's jaw tightened, the uncomfortable shifting in the audience, even the concerned glances being exchanged by the production crew who were watching this disaster unfold in real time. A routine promotional interview was rapidly turning into something much more serious and uncomfortable. Meryl took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain her composure and professionalism despite being blindsided by Jimmy's completely inappropriate line of questioning. "Jimmy, I think you might be misunderstanding what acting actually involves. It's not about crying on command. It's about finding truth in emotional moments and connecting with experiences that might be very different from your own. But Jimmy wasn't finished. In fact, he seemed energized by what he apparently interpreted as Meryl engaging with his bit. Even though anyone with basic social awareness could see that she was trying to redirect the conversation back to something more respectful and productive. Right. Finding truth, Jimmy said with exaggerated air quotes that made several audience members visibly cringe. But let's be honest here. You've been playing the same character for like 30 years. Sad woman, crying woman, woman with an accent. How hard can it really be when you've got the formula down pat? The insult was so blatant and so disrespectful that even Jimmy's most loyal fans in the audience began to look uncomfortable. This wasn't playful ribbing or the kind of gentle roasting that late-night hosts sometimes engage in with their guests. This was a deliberate attempt to diminish and humiliate someone who had come on the show as a favor, expecting to be treated with basic professional courtesy. Meryl's eyes flashed with something that anyone who had worked with her over the decades would recognize as a warning sign. She had endured difficult directors, demanding schedules, countless interviews with unprepared hosts, but this level of disrespect was something entirely different. Her voice remained controlled, but there was steel beneath the surface as she responded. Jimmy, I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish here, but I came on your show to talk about my work and the film I'm passionate about. If you're not interested in having that conversation, perhaps we should wrap this up. Any reasonable host would have recognized this as a clear signal to change course, to apologize and move the interview back to safer ground. But Jimmy seemed to interpret Meryl's measured response as weakness rather than restraint. His grin widened as he sensed what he thought was an opportunity to push even harder. Oh wow, now you're getting all serious on me, Jimmy said with mock concern, turning to play to his audience. See, this is what I'm talking about. One little joke, and suddenly we're in full drama mode. Is this the part where you start method acting your way out of an uncomfortable conversation? The audience was now completely silent, the kind of uncomfortable quiet that settles over a room when everyone realizes they're witnessing something that shouldn't be happening. Even Jimmy's house band looked like they wanted to disappear into their instruments. The camera operators were getting signals from the control room, but Jimmy seemed oblivious to everything except his own perceived cleverness. Meryl sat perfectly still for a moment, and anyone familiar with her performances would recognize the look of someone gathering themselves before making a crucial decision. When she spoke again, her voice carried the kind of quiet authority that had commanded respect in boardrooms and on film sets for over 4 decades. Let me explain something to you, Jimmy. When you invite someone onto your show, you're entering into an agreement. I give you my time, my presence, and my willingness to promote my work on your platform. In return, you're supposed to provide a basic level of professional respect. That's not drama. That's just how civilized people interact with each other. Jimmy's response revealed just how tone-deaf he really was to the situation unfolding around him. Instead of recognizing that he had pushed a respected colleague too far, he seemed to double down on his approach with even more enthusiasm. Civilized people. Wow, okay. So now I'm uncivilized because I don't treat you like some kind of untouchable Hollywood royalty. Come on, Meryl, lighten up. This is comedy, is what we do here. If you can't handle a little roasting, maybe late-night television isn't for you. That comment landed like a bomb in the studio. The suggestion that Meryl Streep, who had been graciously appearing on talk shows for longer than Jimmy had been alive, somehow didn't understand how television worked was so absurd and condescending that even his own staff looked mortified. Meryl's composure finally began to crack, not into tears or anger, but into something far more devastating for Jimmy. She looked at him with the kind of disappointed expression that a teacher might give a student who had just revealed they had learned. Nothing all semester? A little roasting, she repeated slowly, as if she couldn't quite believe the words. Jimmy, do you understand what you've actually been doing for the past 10 minutes? You've systematically tried to diminish my life's work, suggested that my craft is worthless, and now you're telling me that I don't understand television. All while I'm sitting here as your guest, trying to promote a film that deals with serious themes about family and loss. The camera caught every word, every pause, every moment of this extraordinary dressing down. Here was one of the most accomplished performers in the history of entertainment calmly and methodically explaining to a late-night host exactly how badly he had miscalculated. But Jimmy, incredibly, still didn't seem to grasp the severity of what was happening. His response showed just how deep his lack of awareness really went. "Oh, come on, you're being way too sensitive about this. Look, I get it. You're used to everyone kissing your feet and telling you how amazing you are. But this is the real world. This is comedy. You can't take a joke? Then maybe you should stick to those serious art house movies where nobody expects you to have a sense of humor." The audience collectively gasped. Several people could be heard making sounds of disbelief. Even Jimmy's sidekick, who usually laughed at everything the host said, sat in stunned silence. The suggestion that Meryl Streep lacked a sense of humor was so disconnected from reality that it seemed to break something fundamental in the room. Meryl stood up slowly, her movement so deliberate and controlled that it commanded everyone's attention. She looked down at Jimmy with an expression that combined pity and disappointment in equal measure. "You know what the real tragedy is here, Jimmy? You had the opportunity to have a genuine conversation with someone who has spent an entire career trying to bring truth and beauty into the world. Instead, you chose to use your platform to try to tear someone down for your own amusement. That says everything about who you are and nothing about who I am." Jimmy, finally beginning to realize that something had gone seriously wrong, tried to backtrack with nervous laughter. Hey, come on, sit back down. We're just having fun here. Don't take it so personally." But Meryl was already moving toward the edge of the interview area, her decision clearly made. She turned back to face Jimmy one final time, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of someone who had earned every ounce of respect she commanded. "The difference between us, Jimmy, is that I spent my career building people up through storytelling, while you've apparently built yours by tearing people down for cheap laughs. I won't be a part of that anymore tonight." The studio fell into absolute silence as Meryl began walking toward the exit. Every step she took seemed to echo through the space, and the cameras followed her movement with the kind of focus usually reserved for the most dramatic moments in cinema. Jimmy sat frozen in his chair, apparently only now beginning to comprehend the magnitude of what he had just caused. "Meryl, wait, come on," Jimmy called out, his voice cracking slightly as panic began to set in. "We're live here. You can't just walk off. This is television." But Meryl didn't even slow down. She moved with the kind of dignified purpose that had characterized her entire career. Never hurried, never frantic, just absolutely determined. As she reached the edge of the interview area, she paused for just a moment and looked back, not at Jimmy, but at the audience who had come to see her. "I'm sorry you had to witness this," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the studio. "You deserve better entertainment than watching someone try to humiliate their guests." The audience erupted. It's not in laughter or applause, but in a mixture of supportive cheers for Meryl and uncomfortable murmurs about what they had just seen. Several people could be heard calling out supportive messages to her, while others expressed their disapproval of Jimmy's behavior with boos and negative comments. Jimmy, now visibly sweating under the studio lights, tried desperately to regain control of the situation. Folks, let's all just calm down here. Meryl's just having a little moment. She'll be back after we talk this through." But even as he said it, everyone in the studio could see that Meryl had no intention of coming back. She was already at the exit, moving with the same grace and determination that had carried her through hundreds of performances. The security guard at the door stepped aside respectfully, clearly understanding that this was not a situation where he should interfere. Jimmy's desperation became more apparent with each passing second. "You know what? This is actually great. Television," he said, trying to spin the disaster into something positive. "This is real, unscripted drama happening right here in front of you. You're seeing something that's never happened on late night before." The audience wasn't buying it. Several people had started to leave their seats, apparently as disgusted with Jimmy's behavior as Meryl had been. Others were pulling out their phones, clearly documenting what they recognized as a historic moment in television, though not for the reasons Jimmy had hoped, as Meryl disappeared through the exit. Jimmy made one final pathetic attempt to salvage his show. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Meryl Streep, everyone. I guess we learned tonight that some people just can't handle a little comedy. We'll be right back after these messages. But his words fell flat in the hostile atmosphere he had created. The audience was still buzzing with negative energy, many people clearly upset by what they had witnessed. Jimmy's attempt to blame Meryl for not being able to handle comedy only made him look more tone-deaf and cruel. During the commercial break, chaos erupted behind the scenes. Producers rushed to Jimmy's desk, clearly in crisis mode as they tried to figure out how to proceed with the rest of the show. The remaining scheduled guests were reportedly reconsidering their appearances, not wanting to be associated with a disaster that had just unfolded. When the show returned from commercial, Jimmy faced an audience that had fundamentally changed. The energy that had been electric with anticipation at the beginning of the evening had transformed into something cold and hostile. Jimmy tried to continue with his monologue, but his jokes fell flat, and his usual confidence had evaporated.
That
was interesting, Jimmy said, attempting his trademark casual tone, but failing miserably. I guess some people take themselves a little too seriously. But hey, that's Hollywood for you, right? The audience response was scattered and unenthusiastic. Jimmy's attempt to paint himself as the victim of Meryl's supposed oversensitivity was clearly not landing with people who had witnessed his unprovoked attack on a respected guest. Throughout the rest of the show, Jimmy seemed rattled and off his game. His timing was off, his energy was forced, and even his staff appeared to be going through the motions rather than supporting him with their usual enthusiasm. The magic that makes live television work had been completely shattered by his own actions. In the final segment of the show, Jimmy made one last attempt to address what had happened, but it only made things worse. Look, I want to be clear about something. We invite guests on this show to have fun, to laugh, to entertain you, the audience. Sometimes that means pushing boundaries a little bit. I guess some people can't handle that. Well, that's their choice. Even this nan-apology revealed how little Jimmy understood about what he had done wrong. He was still framing the situation as Meryl's failure rather than his own, still refusing to acknowledge that basic respect for guests should be the foundation of any interview show. As the credits rolled and the audience filed out, many of them were still talking about what they had witnessed. But they weren't discussing Meryl's new film or her latest performance. Instead, they were talking about how one of Hollywood's most respected figures had been forced to defend her dignity against a host who seemed to have forgotten that his guests were human beings deserving of basic courtesy. The irony was perfect. Jimmy had thought he was creating comedy gold by going after Meryl Streep. Instead, he had created a moment that would be remembered not for its humor, but for its cruelty. He had turned what should have been a celebration of artistic achievement into a masterclass in how not to treat people. And in the end, the person who came out looking like a true professional was the one who chose to walk away rather than participate. In the degradation of what television interviews should represent, what do you think? Should talk show hosts be held accountable when they cross the line with their guests? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more behind-the-scenes stories from Hollywood